Hello, this is Michel Vetter. I'm the president of the Collège Universitaire Henri Dunant, and today I want to speak about how global values could combat human trafficking. Actually, this is a big challenge because we could consider human trafficking as a challenge not only to human rights, to positive law, but also to moral values. And if we look at what we shall be discussing today, first, briefly, what is human trafficking? Second, global values, both positive law and moral standards. And third, perspectives and proposals. And in a nutshell, it's raise awareness, educate, and train. Then, human trafficking. We can see that human trafficking is a contemporary form of slavery. It's a universal scourge. There are more slaves today than ever in history. It's mostly invisible or unseen, intentionally or not. It's everywhere in all countries in many forms. Slave labor, agriculture, building, domestic work, fisheries, sexual slavery, forced motherhood, forced organ transplants, child soldiers, sale of children, worst forms of child labor, forced and early marriage. And we see figures here, some figures, estimates between 40 and 60 million people are enslaved worldwide, and slavery generates illicit profits of the order of $150 billion each year. 50% of slaves today are in labor slavery, 37% are in forced marriage, 12% are in sex slavery, and 70% women and girls, 30% men and boys, 25% under the age of 18. Global values. As I told you, global values, we shall examine both positive law and moral standards. If we look at positive law, we see that we have international law, international treaties, and the Palermo Protocol, adopted on the 15th of November 2000, is now 20-year-old, gives the first international definition of human trafficking. This protocol, to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking persons, especially women and children, is almost universally ratified. It is the only universal international treaty dealing with human trafficking in a comprehensive manner. And then I would like to mention, even if we come later more in detail with several treaties, I would like to mention the Council of Europe Convention against human trafficking in 2005. Then we had the 2015 ASEAN Convention, and definitely we have also universal instruments dealing with human trafficking from various approaches: human rights, refugee law, child rights, international labor law, international humanitarian law applicable in armed conflicts, international criminal law. And on the domestic level, we shall see we have national constitutions, plans of action, criminal codes. When we speak of moral standards, we shall mention, among others, an interreligious appeal of 2014, pastoral orientations of 2019, and of course we should keep in mind Laudato Si as a general framework of moral values to combat the root causes of human trafficking. Positive law. First, I would like to come back to the Palermo Protocol. As you see, we have 178 state parties, and of course some countries did not ratify, some others are becoming parties, like Bangladesh, Brunei, Palau, and I think it's quite important to see that this definition is understood everywhere, understood and included also in regional treaties and also in national constitutions. Then we have to mention, of course, this 1999 ILO Convention 182 on the worst forms of child labor, which includes slavery, prostitution, and trafficking. And as you see, 187 states have become parties to this important treaty. Then we have also on the regional level, in addition to the 2005 Council of Europe Convention, we have this European Union directive on preventing and combating trafficking in human beings and protecting its victims, which is also quite important. Then I would say we should definitely not miss that before the Palermo Protocol, we had this African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. Article 15 is protecting children from all forms of economic exploitation, and so is trying to regulate child labor. Article 27 is protecting a child against all forms of sexual exploitation, sexual abuse. And Article 29 is asking state parties to take appropriate measures to prevent sale, trafficking, and abduction of children. We should also mention, before coming to the national constitutions, that at the national level, at the international level, of course, we had, as mentioned, the 2015 ASEAN Convention. But at the domestic level, several constitutions prohibit slavery. I would like first the 1949 Constitution of India. This Article 23 is mentioning trafficking human beings and prohibition of traffic in human beings and forced labor, also prohibition of employment of children in factories or in any other hazardous employment. Then we shall see that the Constitution of Mauritania in 1991 was amended, and you have this new Article 13. No one can be reduced in slavery, and this is very important because local customs had been a bit ambiguous about this practice. And then the 1996 new constitution of the new South Africa has also one provision, Article 13, slavery, servitude, and forced labor. No one may be subjected to slavery, servitude, or forced labor. We shall also consider that many countries, and not only the 15 you see on the screen, many countries have adopted national plans of action to fight human trafficking. We should mention also France, which adopted two plans of action. The last one, the second one in 2019. Switzerland also adopted a plan of action, the US. And those plans of action are quite important to actually implement not only international law or regional instruments, but also domestic law to better combat human trafficking. And you see that then obviously part of this national legislation, domestic legislation, is the adoption of criminal codes and specific provisions dealing with trafficking in persons. You see here the example of the Canadian legislation. We could also mention the French Code Penal, same for the Swiss Criminal Code, and certainly others. Then moral standards. Moral standards, I would say it's very important to see that many religious organizations denounce human trafficking and provide assistance to victims. And they do that in two ways. The first is making quite clear their position condemning modern slavery. And here you have these two, of the 2nd December 2014, this joint declaration of religious leaders against modern slavery, adopted by Christian, Buddhist, Jewish, and Muslim representatives. It's quite important indeed to have this common position, and not only a common position, but also a common commitment to ask respective communities to work against human trafficking. And that was also part of the text of this declaration of December 2014. Then you see that also interreligious, this document on human fraternity or for world peace and living together between Pope Francis and Muslim religious and political leaders was quite important, because we have also to see human trafficking in a context, and this context is definitely peace, is definitely respecting every human being. Then, as I told you, it's not enough to have common declarations, condemnations, but we need also to have grassroots action on against human trafficking. And here is one example of the Washington, D.C. interreligious staff community in the US, of course, interface toolkit of human trafficking, resources for worship and action, prayer and assistance. You see, if we start by the Catholic, we must say that the sacred scriptures of various religions, be it, of course, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, and others, contain standards defending human life and dignity, and therefore prescribing human trafficking. And I must say, here is a quote of Pope Francis in 2016, but I would like also to read you a statement of Pope Francis, and this is very important because he says one of the most troubling of those open wounds in the world is the trade of human beings, a modern form of slavery. It violates the God-given dignity of so many of our brothers and sisters and constitutes a true crime against humanity. But as I told you, the year before in New York, the Pope made also a very strong statement against human trafficking. Then we have also to consider that this is not exactly new, but this is also part of the search of universal ethic, a new look at the natural law. A new look at the natural law, not only to, I would say, re-anchor key concepts of protecting human life and dignity, but also to reach out to other religions. And another very concrete tool is the pastoral orientations on human trafficking. The Pope Francis issued those pastoral orientations in 2019 to provide Catholic bishops with, and I quote, an understanding of human trafficking that motivates and sustains a much-needed long-term struggle. The orientations are for use by Catholic dioceses, parishes and religious congregations, schools and universities, by Catholic and other organizations of civil society, and by any groups willing to respond. Besides their implementation in local programs, as well as collaboration at a distance, the orientations also offer key points for homilies, education, and media. Furthermore, the Santa Marta Group, endorsed by Pope Francis, was established in 2014 to promote the cooperation between the Church and law enforcement officials combating human trafficking. And we have also to say that historically, certain religious orders have been established for the specific purpose of paying the ransom of slaves, such as the Trinitarian Order founded in 1098 in France, and today numerous Catholic sister organizations are working to prevent human trafficking, inform the public, and assist survivors. And you see here examples of websites providing information, important documents of the Holy See, Catholic organizations, but also of the Church of England and the Salvation Army. Protestant, definitely, our Protestant brothers do recognize that human trafficking is a crime against humanity and a sin. Human trafficking denies the values of human life, exposes victims to serious health risks, endangers the mental well-being of victims, and impedes the ability of victims to reach their full God-given potential. The Church of England. The Church of England, with Archbishop Justin Welby, has long been committed to denouncing and combating human trafficking. And we see here a quote by the Most Reverend Justin Welby, the head of Archbishop of Canterbury. Trafficking human beings is one of the greatest scandals and tragedies of our age. And actually, we have to see that the Church of England has established a Kluwer initiative which enables the Church of England dioceses and wider church networks to raise awareness of modern slavery, identify victims, and to help provide victim support and care. And now to our Muslim brothers and sisters, you see here that the Islamic Society of North America actually has made research on the way Islamic Sharia and jurisprudence did condemn human trafficking according to the Holy Quran and the traditions of the Prophet. And you see that the principles of Islamic law were actually included in one document of this United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, which is quite important, I think, to precisely make the link between the international organizations and moral authorities. Jewish, definitely, human trafficking is also condemned, forbidden by human trafficking in many forms. And you see here quotes from the Talmud, quotes from the Torah, quotes from Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, and we have to also to refer to this very interesting document, Fighting Modern Slavery, a handbook for Jewish communities. It's freely available online, and clearly I strongly advise the reading of this, because you see the Jewish imperative to fight modern slavery, and actually referring to the Jewish experience of slavery. We were slaves to Pharaoh, and now we are free. And also this imperative to protect the most vulnerable members of our society, to provide fair treatment of workers, and to consider the creation in the image of God of every person, and indeed to prohibit buying goods produced unethically, and to ask for redemption of captives. I think this is very important. I would like also to mention, of course, Buddhism, and here you see a Journal of Buddhist Studies with an article on human slavery and Buddhism. I would say that, of course, in addition to all those religious values, we have also other kinds of standards. For example, the fundamental principles of International Red Cross and Red Crescent, adopted in 1965, could certainly be fully used in the fight against human trafficking in human beings by humanitarian organizations in disaster and conflict situations. Another example could be the guiding principles on business and human rights developed by the UN in 2011. They are discussed annually at the UN Forum on Business and Human Rights. The 2020 edition will be held in November from the 16th to the 18th of November. But now, if we come to perspectives and proposals, to the last part of this short introduction, human trafficking is unfortunately on the rise. There is an urgent need to raise awareness, the general public as well as professionals, governments, international organizations, business, educate about international instruments, treaties if you prefer, national provisions and moral standards. Prevent, protect, prosecute, rehabilitate. Of course, if we speak of prosecution, it's not prosecuting victims, but it's prosecuting traffickers. Because victims at times are prosecuted because they are illegal immigrants, but they should be first considered as victims and not as criminals. And fifth, support domestic and international initiatives to make the business sector accountable for human trafficking. An example is the ongoing Swiss Popular Initiative for Corporate Justice, Initiative Multinationale Responsable, which shall be voted upon on the 27th of September 2020. We have also to say that in 2010, the Swiss government supported the ICOCA organization, which developed a code of conduct for private security service providers. This code of conduct includes the prohibition of human trafficking, Article 39, forced labor, Article 40, and the worst forms of child labor, Article 41. In 2015, the UK adopted the Modern Slavery Act, a world-leading legal framework. The UK government, with other governments, issued in 2017 a call to action to end forced labor, modern slavery, and human trafficking, through which they committed to taking steps to eliminate slavery from their economies and eradicate human trafficking from public and private sector supply chains. Following these endorsements, the UK government, with the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, adopted in 2018 the principles to guide government action to combat human trafficking in global supply chains. In conclusion, there should be a convergence and a synergy between moral standards, religious and others, domestic legislation, regional and universal treaties, as well as non-binding soft law, such as declarations and resolutions. What is key is the political will of governments and the pressure of public conscience on business to fully implement those moral and legal standards protecting the life and dignity of victims of human trafficking and of all human beings. Thank you.